Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission Podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and we are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through your life and with your relationship with Christ. We've been in a series on being countercultural in a secular world, and today I welcome a very special guest who has so graciously agreed to share her testimony today. Her name is Mary Corona, and we will be diving into a topic we haven't really yet explored, and that is with sex and sex addiction, anxiety, divorce, spiritual warfare, and spiritual attacks. And some more things. There'll be some surprises along the way, I'm sure. But Mary, thank you so much for being here and for being willing and open and vulnerable to share your testimony.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll dive right in. Can you just start by sharing a little bit about your background? How did you grow up? Were you raised in the faith? And then how did things progress as you've gone through your life?
So in my childhood, we were raised in the faith. We were raised with Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, God, and but we were like a Sunday church family. So they encouraged us at home, but we didn't really do anything outside of like Sunday churches as far as any get-togethers or anything like that.
Hmm.
We were really sheltered as children, very helicopter parenting as far as like what not to watch, who to be around. And we didn't go to public school. We just stayed at home. So
Okay,
we
you were
really didn't have,
homeschooled.
yes.
Okay,
I
me too.
loosely use that word. Yeah, I loosely go into that as we get more into the story as well with me. So I would say we were supposed to be homeschooled, but there was never any materials given. So for many years, I was lacking in education.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay, so there wasn't schooling actually going on for a period of time.
yes, at the time, I think it was a money thing at the time. My dad was petrified of public schools. He felt like they just were not, I guess, and especially nowadays, I understand kind of the perspective, but the problem is, I guess, not really liking the government, is I would
Hmm.
put it plainly. But I don't know if it was a money thing really or anything, but yeah, we didn't have materials for schooling for many years.
So it sounds like he knew that the public school system was corrupt, so to speak, and not going to teach you guys the best things, but then also your parents weren't equipped with the right tools and the right things to really jump into homeschooling at first. Now, did that change over the years? Did it get
Yeah.
better or?
Um, so, um, where to jump on it because I feel like we'll jump around, but basically, when right before my parents divorced at some point, when
Okay.
I was around 11, we had moved. We lived in Ohio originally and moved to Arizona. And about a year living in Arizona, my dad did get us homeschooling. So around 11, I was starting my first grade education.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yes. And then I don't even think we were living there a year, and my parents broke the news they were divorcing. Um, And so after that, only a few days after um, the divorce, my dad took me and my sister to live with him and his girlfriend.
Okay.
So from then on, with the divorce custody, I will plainly say that I think he was trying to look good for the
Mm,
courts and put and kind of just threw us in public school.
okay.
And that wasn't a culture shock because my dad apparently just didn't understand how much of an education I was lacking because he put
Mm,
me right in fifth grade. Um,
wow.
yes, it was a big culture shock because you know how in schools you can feel at school out for a day.
Hmm.
Well, they sat me in the class and they were doing a pop quiz, and we were all in our little cubicles, and I'm looking down at this paper, and I'm like, I got so overwhelmed, I started crying and freaking out. I was like, I need to call like my dad. I don't know what I'm looking at. It was multiplication and division.
Wow. I was going to say, did you know how to, or ask, did you know how to read yet?
I did know how to read.
Okay.
So we kind of had like the phonics part. That was like really the only thing we had was phonics. And I don't really, I think just over time, just kind of with my mom, got the reading part and
Okay.
writing.
That's good. That's good. But math, you were like, what is this? Is this a foreign
Yeah.
language?
Yes. So yeah, it was my, and it's just crazy. I guess he was just so out of the loop because he was like in shock that I didn't know this. I'm like, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So from then on, we went into a public school, but I had to sit into like the back, with like kids that need more attention,
Mm.
and literally like crash coursed me on like first through like fifth grade on like, and oh, did I mention it was only the last 2 months of fifth grade?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yeah.
That sounds
So
very intimidating. And so, on top of the educational part, you also had been pretty sheltered from being around other kids. That was probably huge. Fifth grade, that's a very transitional time for kids too, because they're like starting to learn about their bodies and all that kind of stuff as they're about to go into middle school. How was that?
yeah, it was very, I don't know how to say. I feel like with how I was sheltered, I felt like I was a little at the time, a little less mature for that age. I don't know, like a little
Mm-hmm.
more like, so it's kind of more not really sure how to interact with kids in certain ways. Like, so I made friends, but at the same time, I felt like I was not fully socially aware on certain things on how to behave around kids at the same time. I think it
Mm-hmm.
just led to awkward situations of just being an awkward kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, did you have friends outside of this? So before you were thrown into this situation, did you have friends from your neighborhood or from church or anything like that?
No, we really isolated ourselves. My parents really kept things very private. So I would call them like church friends, the kids you get excited to see on Sunday, but you'd never talk to them outside of church or hang outside of church or anything. It's
Hmm.
just during those few hours at Sunday service.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Oh,
had a younger sibling who was 3 years younger, and that was like my best friend for many years.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm curious to hear more about how this kind of goes into your story. So I'll let you take back over and take us where you want to go.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Um, and so much too to like go around with.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, on that topic with being sheltered, I was saying, and just being the how we lived and everything, we can kind of touch on like how less kind of got brought in for me.
Hmm.
Because at a very young age, I want to say about 6 or 7, um, it's so like weird to talk about out loud because I've never talked about it. But around that age, I started to um, get into, I don't know how to say it, pleasuring myself, I guess, is
Okay.
how I would say it. But
Okay.
I didn't know what I was doing either. It was
Hmm.
just something randomly that came up, for me. And I don't remember how I discovered it or what happened. I wasn't exposed to anything like that as a child, like no movies or shows or anything like that.
Hmm.
But I didn't know at all what it was that I was doing because it wasn't just traditional way. I don't want to be explicit on anything.
Sure.
So so but it was so innocent to the fact that literally like my sister was spend the night and read a story to me, and she would spend the night in the room, and I would just be in the bed in the doing it, and she like caught me doing it, and she was like, stop that. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, okay. Like no idea what it is,
Hmm.
like just
Hmm.
innocently finding it out.
Hmm.
So, and at one point after that, it started to make me wonder, like, is this wrong? Like, am I not supposed to do this? Especially like growing up with it, like, am I like in a little kid mind, like, is this wrong?
Hmm.
So I actually at one point went to talk to my mom about it, but my mom is very awkward about things like that. So for her, she was too uncomfortable with the conversation. So I'm like, I think what I'm not doing is right. Like basically telling her this, what I'm doing, but I don't really know how to explain it because I don't quite know what I'm doing, but I know it feels good.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I think my mom pretty much kind of just told me like, well, I kind of remember now in this, like, how comfortable she was. She's like, well, it's okay, just pray to Jesus. And I'm just like, okay, but it doesn't really solve the situation because I don't know what's going on.
Hmm.
So I can do that, but it doesn't really get to the root issue of what's causing that.
Hmm.
So, um, so that didn't stop. And I think it honestly just got worse as I got older. Just like the feeling and the need for it. So that really just kind of continued on throughout the years. And then as things progressed with like the divorce and everything, then things kind of went um, more into that direction. So I'm trying not to be too long. I don't know how like long it. I'm not
Oh
trying to do.
no. No, no. You take your time as long as you need.
Okay. Um, so that's another thing on it with the whole with my mom thing, because I even talked to her about this, is something I've learned is that as parents, there's so much spiritual warfare that you have to battle against for your kids
Hmm.
because there's so many generational curses that can attach on through your bloodline. And if you don't patch it or if you're not consistently paying attention, praying, I feel like you have to be able to be comfortable and being uncomfortable in order to battle these things. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I feel like, yeah, because I feel like if there was, and it's not that my mom's a problem, she didn't know any better, she didn't
Hmm.
have those resources or that foundation.
Hmm.
So it's just something I keep in mind for myself when I have children, is
Hmm.
we got to be able to teach them how to battle these things themselves and ourselves for them.
That's an
Um,
interesting question to pose too. Do you feel or have you discovered that there may have been any any sort of attachment to either of your parents with that realm of stuff? So whether it was sexuality or pornography or, that spirit, was that something that you feel was passed from one of your parents' bloodlines?
Yeah, absolutely. I know for sure on my dad's side of the family, was a lot of like lust and sexual morality. And my dad, I feel like he wanted to go on the right path, but I feel like he suffered too, because I know my dad was not faithful like you should have been to my mom.
Mm.
So I absolutely feel like when you're exposing yourself to these things, you are exposing them to your household and your children.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I definitely believe that.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. This has been a topic, spiritual warfare that we've been talking about on the podcast quite a bit. And last week we talked about children a little bit and how to pray over our children and protection for our children. And it is such an important thing as mothers that we speak life and we speak over some of this stuff because until they can make decisions for themselves, until they can decide or know or have the discernment to know whether they have something dark or a spirit attached to them, it's really up to us to say anything that's of darkness that's here, you don't belong here. This child belongs to God and belongs to me.
Yes,
And we
amen.
do have the power to say that in the name of Jesus. But as far as deliverance goes, I've been taking this spiritual warfare class where she talks about when it comes to deliverance, you don't do deliverance on children if they're not aware. Someone has to decide and make that decision. But we do have the authority to pray over our children and to speak over those negative forces on behalf of our young children. So this is a great topic that you're bringing up for us, especially lots and lots of our listeners are moms. And I think
Yeah,
that it's something that we need to be aware of and we need to have an awareness about. And we are specifically talking about the spirit of lust, like we've said, but this applies to other spirits too.
yes,
Children that are growing up in homes where there's alcohol, where there is that dark, angry spirit, or other types of substance abuse or issues. We're
anxiety.
opening doors. Yeah, anxiety. That's a great example.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm glad it's being talked about. It really needs to, like, and because I think the more awareness we have of just how everything, it says in the Bible, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, we wrestle in the spirit. And it's so true. And we're in a
Mhm.
time where everything is so heavy and attacks in the spirit right now.
Mhm.
And it's so important to put that armor on and just go to war for you and your family.
Mhm. Absolutely. I want you to keep going because there's so much more to your story, but I definitely am curious about the why too, like we open the door, we as parents. So it sounds like there's probably something generational opening that door and that there was something, a dark spirit coming after you specifically. but I have to wonder, like, why do these spirits do this to, it's rhetorical, right? Why would they do this to a young child and confuse a little girl? And I'm sure it's just to set you up for confusion and set you up on a wrong path, but I'll let you jump in and kind of keep going.
Yeah, well, I 100% believe like children are always the next generation. And they are also God's most precious jewels, you know, and the devil wants to fumble any generation that's going to come up and rise up this army of the God of God.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yep,
I
great point.
100% believe that's why children are just being so heavily targeted these days.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're just even going to talk about pornography for a second, the readily availableness of pornography to children is insane. I mean, any kid at any age could take and pick up an iPhone and look up anything. And if that phone has no protection on it, which most phones, if they're picking up their parents' phone, it's not going to, these young boys, and girls too, but these young boys, you hear they get exposed to they see something at age 7, 8, 9, and then
Yeah.
they keep coming back to it and keep coming back to it, and then it becomes something much bigger. So yeah, we are certainly under attack. And then what does that result in? And especially for boys, this confusion about what sexuality or what sex should be between a, them and a woman. They're not able
Yeah.
to actually see what the sexual relationship between them and their wife should be because they have all
Yeah.
these wacky ideas now.
Yeah, absolutely. It confuses them. Like it's just a warped image of what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. So take us back. You went to your mom and she's kind of like, just try not to do that, basically. And
Yeah, bless
then
your heart.
did you continue to kind of have that struggle and did it progress into something more?
Yes, it absolutely did. Because it just, as a child, it just didn't really like, I feel like you're so young to not really have that full connection. Like I was raised, oh, love Jesus, but there wasn't like a lot of firm foundation on how to, like I knew
Hmm.
some of the Bible as a child, but not old enough to really comprehend all of that.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was just a consistent thing for me because I couldn't resist what was going on. It was just something that was there that I couldn't stop.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's where that part is. And anxiety hit me at a young age as well. Um, so when I was really young, I remember I used to love being involved in the church and doing shows and everything. And I loved to sing and I would sing all the time. And one day just during church, I like shut down. Was so scared to do anything. Like, and I was young. Like I thought, honestly think about probably the same age that that started was when I just started being worried about how I looked to others. Like I didn't want to raise my hands in worship or clap. I just kind of wanted to shrink away and not be seen. And it just kind of got worse as I got older.
Wow.
Yeah. Um,
That does
I
sound
think,
like a spiritual attack, doesn't it? It's like come after you with confusion, cause this anxiety that's preventing you from praising the Lord. It's interesting.
yeah. That was a lot at once. And now that you say that, yeah, it does sound like that was just a lot from the enemy all at once.
Hmm. Especially for a little
Um,
kid.
yeah. It was confusing for my dad, and my dad is not really good with emotional stuff. So really he would just kind of like get after me for being shy in a way. So
Hmm.
it was kind of like I felt like I was wrong for being so trapped up, but he wasn't really necessarily helping me either.
Hmm.
Um, just a lot of not knowing how to do things, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but so that's kind of how life was going then. And eventually that's when we get to moving part. To the moving part and the divorce and everything. My parents, I always knew they fought a lot. Um, so and they didn't get along, but in your mind as a kid, you're like, oh, they're never like you don't even think about them splitting up that young.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so after moving to Arizona, after that, when they did the divorce, yeah, it was literally only a few days after they broke it down as we were getting divorced, and my dad came up to me and my sibling, and they were like, hey, you're gonna come with me with a friend. She's got a big house, we're gonna just have you there for a bit while your mom gets settled in, and your mom will take y'all back with y'all. Da da da. Well, so the woman lived about like 6 hours away from where we were living. Um, I want to say somewhere around that. I can't remember completely, but at
Hmm.
max.
Yeah, it was far. It
So
wasn't that close.
yeah. Um, so yeah, come to find out, it definitely was his girlfriend that we moved
Mm.
into. She had a daughter a year older than me. Um, and it was very much like we were expected just to be okay with everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm 11 and my younger sibling at the time was like 6, 7. So 3 years apart, so I feel like that roughly sounds right. Um, so yeah, it was a culture shock for that itself. Like you one minute are told your parents are divorcing, and the next you're seeing your dad smack the butt of a woman around a house. Like so just no like just the audacity to like not have any sort of conversation of how your kids are handling this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so that was hard and the whole entire time it was kind of like we were just walking on eggshells the whole time, like as if we were messing up something for him, basically. Like he was always after us, like about anything,
Mm.
like any things that didn't even need to be gone after. Like if I was up early in the morning, I wasn't used to waking up early. He said I looked mad and I needed to change my face. Like he, it was just everything, and it was basically anything he felt like that was going to upset her.
Mm.
So there wasn't really a regard to how emotionally traumatizing a situation like that is.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they were trying to at one point put us into like a therapy for like divorce, like which it was like a church therapy thing where everyone gets together, and that we only went like one time for that.
Hmm.
So, and then the whole school thing. And during the whole time, um, it turned so basically the background that I learned growing up was that he told my mom that he was going to help take care of us while she settled herself down with my cousin in Texas, so her niece. But then in the end, he wanted to turn around and try to take custody of us from her. So
Hmm.
that was him filing custody for us against her and putting us in school, trying to look like a good dad and everything. And
Why
kind of
was it that he wanted to do that? I'm just curious because most dads understand the importance of their daughters being with their mother. Do you know what motivated him to feel like he wanted custody?
I I don't know. With my dad, it's the odd thing, and that's why I really won't understand why he did what he did, because he really pulled the wool over my mom's eyes. He really tricked her into doing this. Because he lied to her. He told her,
Mm-hmm.
like, you can have the kids, we'll set it up, I'll come visit, blah, blah, blah. Like, but no, that was the whole thing. He pulled the wool from under her. Like, basically, he lied to her on that. And then um surprised her with going to file for custody for us. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell his motivations, especially because the whole time it just felt like we were annoying him.
Hmm.
Like it felt like I know he loved us, but we were just walking on eggshells all the time.
Yeah.
Like just like there were good moments, but then there were a lot of like getting after us. And there was a lot to unlearn too, because we had bad habits, of course, as well from how we grew up. Because my mom suffered a lot of depression. So because of the situation she was in and she wasn't happy. So there was a lot of like lack of hygiene habits that we weren't raised with. So there was getting in that, and we
Hmm.
needed.
Hmm.
But just anything as far as like anything behavioral, it wasn't really a conversation, it was just getting after us.
Hmm.
And it's kind of not understanding that situations like that is going to be behavioral because there's so much that you're not getting to talk about. You're just
Sure.
got a lot of emotions inside and we can't feel like we can talk to you.
Hmm. And was your mom home with you guys before this? Like, was she a stay-at-home mom or did she work?
She was a stay-at-home mom.
Wow. So that's a big change too. Her life has just been shaken up that she was staying home with her kids and then now I'm sure she had to get a job or something.
Yeah. Yeah,
How
she
did she
did.
do during all of this? How was her emotional state
Oh,
during
it was
this whole process?
Oh, it was awful, especially because during the whole time, our dad was brainwashing us to hate our mom.
Oh
He
man.
kept telling us all these different things about her to like basically hate her. He told us that the woman he was with was supposed to be our mother. So like, and he literally, and this is the problem with it. And he did, I feel like, spiritually grow from this later on, but this is how bad it was at the point, is that he was like, oh, this is who God was supposed to have be your mother. That's literally what he told us.
Wow.
Yeah, like, and it's just, and he would like, she sent a birthday card for me, and it was something like, oh, and God loves you so much, and I love you just as much as him, just something sweet. And he was like, you see that? She's like something like being a she's doing something wrong right there, because no one can ever love you as much as God. Like anything to just kind of twist, like to show her in a bad light.
Hmm.
And it was just, it was bad, and it did, and it happened. There was such a point where, yeah, me and my sister really had anger to our mom,
Mhm.
unrightfully so. Like, but it was just the way he manipulated everything and talked about her, just because he wanted us to want to be with him.
Sure. He wanted the favor. And that this is such a huge issue and problem with divorce, right? This happens a lot where parents pit the other one against each other, especially when there are custody battles and things like that. There can be a lot of, well, this person is this way. And it's very sad. And it is an example of the enemy getting what he wanted because he hates marriage. He hates what God has designed. So
Yeah.
first he destroys it. And then now he's getting in folks' ears with the negativity and continuing that. And now it's literally damaging the family, right? Because now you have a damaged relationship with your mom. Your dad is overwhelmed because he's in this new situation trying to, make things perfect for this new lady. And both of them are not the best loving versions of themselves. Just kind of now you are an impressionable child in the middle of this. So I hope that those that are listening, that this can be of some lesson learning or encouragement, to those that are considering going through this or are maybe going through this. You know, Divorce does happen, but if it be the best version about it, I don't know how else to say that. Um, you and I met in the Biblical Tea Facebook group. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of threads about divorce or should I get divorced? And I love that there are real biblical women in there saying, unless there's adultery, no, work it out, get it, or the husband is an unbeliever, get it together. Approach this from a
Mhm.
biblical perspective. So I don't want this to sound like I'm promoting divorce by any means. What I'm trying to point out here is look at the damage that it does. Look at what it can do to a child. You went through this. This is your life. And not only did it hurt you and your sibling, but your mother and I'm sure your relationship with your father in the process.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I have two older sisters too. And by the time this was happening though, they were adults, staying in
Okay.
Ohio. But that was
Okay.
hard for them because they had to watch it all and watch their younger siblings go through this from a
Mm.
distance. I mean, at some point, our dad was even restricting how much we were even talking to our sisters.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
so that was like hard on them because they felt so like uninvolved, like they couldn't really be as involved as like they wanted to with the
Mhm.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it was hard, and I will say, um, well, I won't go on that part, but yeah,
Mm.
so it was a lot, and and it really did affect mine and my dad's relationship. That was a big thing. And my mom did get custody of us, and we
Oh, wow.
did
Okay.
yeah, so by the time so fifth grade ended, we were there in the summer, and then pretty much so about 6 months we were living with them. And so by the time sixth grade started, she won custody.
Okay.
And so at the time though, I was so upset about it because by then I felt like I was where I was supposed to be,
Mm.
the good
Hmm.
life. And I was like, I was devastated. Like, it was bad how much my dad talked about mom, because I hated that I was going with her,
Mm.
you know? Um, so sorry. I think about that time and I get sad because I really when I got there, it was so bad. I really treated my mom so awful at first, and she
Mm,
didn't deserve it. But it's just because I had an impression of her,
mhm,
just from everything my dad told me, that I was like, wow, da da da. But eventually, after a while, my mom and me talked, and basically she told everything about dad. So that was another thing, was airing his dirty laundry out. But at the same time, I did need to hear it. But I
mhm,
think at that point, I was so like, there were so many unresolved emotions about everything. I kind of was just angry at both of them
mhm. Yeah,
because I was
yeah.
like, had the leftover feelings from dad, but then now I know everything about dad. And I'm just like, wish there was, I think I probably at that point, if I could have had time to myself, I would have loved to have time for myself.
Mm.
But
That's a
life just
lot
kept
of
on.
heavy stuff to be handling and carrying at 11 years old too.
Yeah, and it was hard for my mom. She had a lot of bitterness for a long time, and um, our living situation. I was saying, I will never not say that I'm grateful that we had a roof over our head, but our living situation was not. It wasn't peaceful. It was very toxic, and it's just because I'm grateful we had a place and they took my mom in at her lowest point, but her sister had bipolar disorder, and she
Mm.
was not on her medicines right, so it was always a constant screaming. She would say the most vile, disgusting things. She was always threatening to kick us out. My mom and her were always fighting. Like, it was just a really tough situation to constantly be in all the time because you never knew when it was going to be a good day or a bad day.
That's interesting about the bipolar part of it because there's a lot of spiritual context to that too, right?
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah. That
I
that's
truly believe.
tough because now you've gone from this other spiritual turmoil to now you're in a new home and there's something else, another aspect to this from the
Yeah.
spiritual realm. And that's can be spiritually related or spirit related.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
mean, it was so bad because for my mom, my mom didn't have any friends herself. She literally just stopped working and taking care of us. And sometimes she would work two jobs, to support us, to take care of us and be comfortable.
Wow.
Um, so, she was doing everything she could for us. And at the same time, like, she was just so tired because it is very draining with that, because it was
Oh
just
yeah.
constant. Um, so she didn't have friends and she never went out. But in the results of that, we kind of became like her outlet. So it was a constant talking about our dad and everything that happened and things that we probably shouldn't be unloaded on as children. But I understood why it was, and I always did because they were together 23 years. And then all of a sudden, to do that, she didn't have an outlet of anybody to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot to deal with, and um at that point, I felt like you don't really process all these emotions as a kid, but looking back, I
Sure.
can tell I had friends, but at the same time, I do know that there was still attitude problems because there were so many unresolved things going on inside of me. So I didn't realize at one point until a friend pulled me aside and was telling me that I was being violent with them too much, basically. Like, I didn't think, like, sometimes you joke and you hit your friends and you're like, but I guess I didn't realize that I was like hitting them.
Mm.
Like, and I'm just like, I didn't really do it like that. So I feel like to me that was like it coming out in a way that I didn't realize I was letting it out in a way of.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a lot of feelings. I definitely feel like that stemmed a lot of how to say it. I definitely went through a lot of feeling like depressed a lot during that age too because I started distancing myself from my dad as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those feelings definitely just kind of weighed heavy on me. I never really felt happy during those times. Like I felt happy with friends, but a lot of the times I just felt heavy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of by the time seventh grade rolled around, I was just writing a lot of like dark and sad like poetry a lot. But things started to get better around high school. I started to get more mellowed out in how I was feeling. Yeah, I would say I made good friends at the time during high school, and the years kind of went by. I completely. rejected my dad at that point and stopped contact with him. I did that the summer of 6th grade going into 7th grade.
Okay.
Just because a whole drama incident happened that he accused me of having an attitude when I didn't. He's
Mm.
and I just basically told him like I'm not gonna do this anymore with you. Like there I had done nothing, so I didn't go with him for the summer, and then from then we just stopped talking. So going into junior year of high school, I started having a lot of dreams about my dad. And I'd been talking more with my eldest sister, and she had been keeping up a relationship with my dad at that point. And I kind of was talking to her about it, and I said, I don't know. I was like, I don't know why I'm suddenly having dreams of dad. I haven't really thought about him, anytime with this. And she said, well, do you think you want to talk to him? Because I think one of my dreams might have been trying to get closure. I'm not sure. It was so long ago.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
I said, well, I said, maybe it is time that we try to talk it out, and see if we can't even get a little closure or something. So we did, I think she gave him my number and we set up a time to meet. I think it was possibly around my birthday, I don't know. But we went and we got something to eat. And I told him everything of how I felt during that time. And I know I feel like I don't remember that he necessarily apologized, but I felt like he listened to me and he acknowledged my feelings. And I
Hmm.
felt like that was enough for me. So we started then trying to rebuild our bond.
Okay.
Um, so during that point, we started hanging out a lot. He got a job in my city. At that time, he lived in Texas as well. I lived back in Texas, but he was hours away. But he got a job in the city I was in. So we spent more and more time together. We would go to church together. He really seemed like he had changed a lot.
Hmm.
Like in his at that time now they got married, so my stepmom as well. So yeah, and we were growing close together, very much so. I was learning a lot more about God with him and getting deeper in faith with them. It was definitely not like how he was talking in the past. So, and um it felt right. It felt good. My mom was of course not really happy about it, and that kind of caused some fights for us. Because we had kind of still struggled with fights over the years, and I think that's just given the situation of where we were at. It was just so much going on. But we,
Hmm.
loved each other, but
Hmm.
obviously like much more than the any fights. She's my mom, but I think she was scared I was gonna get hurt. So I think in her panic, she just fought with me. So that wasn't really great. And it was kind of a thing of like, I love you both. And it was kind of a thing of telling my dad too, when we were hanging out during that time, he would try to kind of talk about his side of stuff. And I just told him, like, we've touched on this. I love you both. This isn't choosing sides. I want to have you both in my life. I'm
Hmm.
not, she's got her side of the story. You got your side of the story.
Yeah.
And so at this time, I think I was almost 18. So, or I was already 18 or I was almost 18. But so yeah, that was kind of so basically at that point, after about a year, I think we had been back in touch. They offered me to go live with them for my senior year. And the reason being is because at that age, I had wanted to do so much. I wanted to get my license already. I wanted to start working already, but I never had anybody to go and take me to do these things. I didn't know how to go do these things on my own, and just the whole kind of still a little over the sheltered aspect of being scared to like go out by yourself and do stuff.
Hmm.
So they were like, we want you to come live with us. You'll have your senior year, we'll help you get your license and help you get like learn how to drive, that way and you can save up because I wanted to move out on my own as soon as senior year was over. They're like, we're gonna help you build to that. So I was like, okay, I was like, yeah, like that sounds good. It felt right, and I was scared to tell my mom and my cousin who I lived with as well, my aunt's daughter and all of them, because they all just had a negative thing about my dad, which I understand given what happened.
Hmm.
But so yeah, um a fun fact on that, when we packed up the car to go move with them, I think we were gonna meet them halfway and unload. But somehow in the middle of the night when we packed up the car, someone robbed the entire like car basically of my stuff. So
Whoa, that's crazy.
yeah, I just remembered that. Yeah, literally the only thing they didn't take was I had a box of books, so it was too heavy. And yeah, I literally
Wow.
only had clothes and a backpack I had for traveling. So
Wow. That's wild.
yeah, it was really crazy. I guess we were packing late into the night. I guess the car just forgot to get locked. But I
Mhm.
guess I just someone was watching while we were just packing up the car.
Yeah, and what a
So
weird way to start your move back to your dad's house with nothing
yeah,
but books.
yeah, yeah, it was really wild. Yeah, that was such a weird time, but it was all good. Got new clothes. It was all good.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but yeah, so honestly, it really went so well. Like first moving in together, we went to church all the time together. We Bible study stuff I wanted to do. I was really excited growing closer to God with them and everything.
Mhm.
And so there were some issues here and there at the time, but nothing that was major to me. But more towards the end of the stay there. So I want to say we moved in June. So probably more towards the end of the year, things kind of got a little strange. And I was realizing just from what they taught me that I was holding on to a lot of still hurt from when we lived together.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was, from my understanding, I felt like I was getting spiritually attacked with like anger towards my stepmom and my dad for it. And I wanted to talk to them about it because I wanted to get like released from it and like talk about and heal from it, but I was terrified because with our past, I felt like if I said something, it was going to be twisted around. Even though we came so far in our relationship, I felt like that's what was going to happen because my anxiety was still bad at this point. I couldn't order for myself in restaurants. My dad would order with me for me, or my friends would order for me in restaurants. I was petrified to speak.
Hmm. It sounds like you
um,
had a fear of confrontation.
yeah, it was just yeah, a whole bunch of social anxiety and fear of confrontation, rejection, everything just from how things used to be. So, um, I did try to say something, but when I said it, my stepmom wanted to talk to me right then, but I was terrified and I was like, I'll talk in the morning. Well, then the morning comes and I am procrastinating because I'm petrified to try to talk about this and get these feelings out. Well, my stepmom storms into my room and basically is yelling at me because I'm not talking to her about it. So, yeah, I'm just in my bed and she just comes in basically like, you're not doing what you're supposed to do and you want it all on your time and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it was my feelings, like,
Yeah.
to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we basically, we went back and forth on that, but we squashed it actually because we came together and and I even told her how I was feeling and we like said we loved each other. We squashed it. Like at this point, we were very close. Like she called me a daughter to her, and I looked at her like a mother figure as well at the time, because we just grew so close. Like we went shopping together, breakfast together. I adored her. Um, and so from then on, things just seemed like it went normal. Like we were doing good. I was working at the time, working late, but I still went to church on Sundays with them. We were doing full weekends and stuff, and I enjoyed it, but I had to stop because of the work I was in. So then so then winter break comes for school, and my dad sits me down and he basically says like, "Hey, I'm not finding work here. I've got a job, but I'm gonna have to travel out." And he was like, "So you're gonna have to go back to Texas. Like you're gonna have to go back to San Antonio, I'm sorry."
Mhm.
And I'm just like, okay. Like, so I'm trying to figure out where I'm gonna go because I have a best friend and we've been planning to move in together after high school. I
Mhm.
really don't want to go back to my aunt's house.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm like, okay. So I called my best friend and I was like, hey, like, is there any chance I can come stay with you? Because I know we're gonna plan to move in together after the school year. Like, is this fine? So yeah, so they agreed. Her mom was just so amazing. Like they were like, yeah, absolutely. So I was like, okay, I'll move in with them. And there was at one point during this when I was with my dad alone in the kitchen. I looked at him and I'm like, and I remember this. I was like, is it really that you've got a job that I've got to go back to San Antonio? Because something just felt off about it.
Mhm.
And he was just like, and the way he looked at me, it was a very odd way he looked at me. He kind of looked like he wanted to say something, but he was just like, basically said that it was for the job, basically. But it was
Mhm.
just something in me. I remember that, like that interaction. I was like, something just fell off, but I said, okay. So they were very kind and they gave me a car that was my stepsister. So my stepmom drove that and he drove that. But I noticed the whole way there, my stepmom would not talk to me and she would not look at me.
Mhm.
Like when they went to drop me off, she wasn't even going to get out of the car to say bye to me.
Mhm.
Like, and it was so confusing to me because what I was saying before is everything was back to normal during that whole time since that interaction.
Mhm.
Nothing, not a hair was like, I would have picked up that something was there. She still kissed me, she still hugged me, she still said she loved me,
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm.
So yeah, I literally at that time when he went to drop me off, I was like, oh, like, are we not gonna say bye to Abby? And so he said it, so she came out, she hugged me, but then she got right back in. And I was like, okay. So then at that point, when I was living with my best friends, we were still in our last semester of senior year, and they worked, so I was alone a lot of the times, like, because we had early release for senior year too. So, like, yeah, I was just in the house. I didn't have a driver's license or anything, and I was wanting a job, but I was trying to find a job that would work with school hours and everything. Um, So yeah, so I was and at that point my dad was not really answering my texts. Like he would call me and check on me, but it was like literally only like when he, I guess, had the time to do it or on his terms.
Mhm.
I would text him about certain things and he wouldn't respond, and on the phone I would be like, "Hey, I asked you this." And he's like, "Oh, well, I just had nothing to say."
Mhm.
And I'm just like, "Okay." I'm like, "All right then." So I just kind of went doing my own thing. Um, and it just felt weird, and I was feeling like there was something going on, but I just let it go. Come to find out months later, apparently my stepmom was holding a grudge over that,
Mhm.
and basically, I guess was hiding it the whole time. And then I don't know if they had just been planning this or what happened, but that's apparently what it is, that he said I disrespected her and that I was telling that he said I told him directly I didn't like her. I'm like, that never happened. I was like, we never had that conversation. I was
Mhm.
like, and as much as I was terrified to just talk to you about what I was feeling, I would never be able to just tell you that if I did feel that way, you know? I was
Mhm.
like, so it's crazy. And then he tried using a situation where um, he had family come in and we were out to dinner. And I had social anxiety at the time. So I didn't talk because when people are talking so much, I don't insert myself. Like I'm just to myself. But he said that I was being absolutely rude and acting like I was arrogant above everyone and not to talk to them.
Mhm.
Like, and like he literally texted me that in the middle of our conversation about this, and I'm like, you don't know me at all. Like,
Mhm.
and you don't even try to know me. Like, you don't even try to understand like what it is that I'm going through or try to help me through it. You
Mhm.
just make your own assumptions of what it is.
Mhm.
Which is wild to me because as much as they understood about spiritual warfare, because that's what a lot they talked about, I guess they just didn't understand like the level of what these spirits are at the same time, because it's just so wild. I guess for everyone else, it was apparent to them. I don't know.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I know that a huge piece of spiritual warfare and allowing these things into us and not being able to get rid of them is unforgiveness. So the fact that your stepmom was holding on to resentment and had unforgiveness in her life, that is an avenue to hang on to that negative spirit. So it's interesting. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. As you can hear, Mary has been through a lot. And what this conversation really highlights is the damage that divorce can do on families and spiritual warfare, demons, and being demonized. So, next week, we're going to hear more about Mary's story and what ended up resulting in happening in her life, in her relationships, in her romantic relationships, as a result of this history and the things that happened to her as a child. So, thank you for tuning in today. Stay tuned for next week. And thank you for being on this journey. As always, if you want to follow along outside of this podcast, you can do so on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at The Radiant Mission. Today, I'm going to close with Proverbs 19, verse 3, and I'm actually going to read from the NLT or New Living Translation, which I don't normally do, but it is just so real that I have to use that version. People ruin their lives by their own foolishness, and then they're angry at the Lord. How real is that? We are wishing you a radiant week, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.